I heard faint and hesitating footsteps from below on the uncarpeted stairs. Before a head appeared above the landing, I had decided it was a woman, and it was. When she got to my level, she stopped again, glanced the other way, and then saw me. She was a new one on me, 50 or maybe a little more, slim and slick in a mink coat. I said politely, "Good evening." She asked with a sort of gasp, "Are you Philip Tingley?" I nodded. "Don't you recognize me?" That seemed to hit some mark. "How would I recognize you?" she demanded sharply. "I don't know. From my statue in the park, maybe?" I stood aside from her passage to the door. "Come in." She hesitated a second, then pulled her shoulders up as if bracing herself against peril, and swept by me. I followed her in and motioned her to the living bedroom and shut the door. All was dark before me, figuratively speaking, but anyway I could try some fancy groping and stumbling. I went up to her. "Let me take your coat. This isn't the sort of chair you're used to, but it'll have to do." She shuddered away from me and glanced nervously around. When she sat, she just let enough of her come into contact with the shabby, soiled upholstery to call it sitting. Then she looked at me. I have never regarded myself as a feast for the eye. My attractions run more to the spiritual, but on the other hand, I am not a toad, and I resented her expression. "It seems," I ventured, "that something about me falls short of expectations." She made a contemptuous noise. "I told you on the phone that there can be nothing sentimental about me, and never has been." "Okay," I agreed. "I'm not sentimental either." "I wouldn't expect you to be." If the breath of her voice had dribbled off the edge of a roof, it would have made icicles. "It's not in you from either side, neither from your father nor from me. My brother says you're a blackguard. He also says you're a coward and a bluffer, but considering where your blood came from, I don't believe that. I tell you frankly, I think my brother is making a mistake." She was biting the words off. "That's why I came. He thinks you'll take what he has offered, but I don't. I know I wouldn't, and half of you came from me." I was loping along behind, trying to keep up. The best bit seemed to be that I was a blackguard, so I did as well as I could with a sneer. "He thinks I'm a coward, does he?" I emitted an ugly little laugh. "And he thinks I'll take his offer. I won't." "What will you take?" "What I said. That's final." "It is not final," she said sharply. "You're making a mistake, too. You're a fool if you think my brother will give you $1 million. He will, or else." "No, he won't." She moved on the chair, and I thought she was going to slide off, but she didn't. "All men are fools," she said bitterly. "I thought I had a cool head and knew how to take care of myself, but I was doomed to be ruined by men. When I was a pretty little thing in that factory, that finished me with men, I thought. But there are more ways than one. I don't deny that you have some right to something, but what you demand is ridiculous. What my brother offers is also ridiculous, I admit that. If I had money of my own, but I haven't. You're obdurate fools, both of you. He has never learned to compromise, and apparently you haven't either. But you'll have to on this. You both will." I kept the sneer working. "He's a pig-headed blubberlip," I asserted. "It takes two to compromise. What about him?" She opened her mouth and closed it again. "So," I said sarcastically, "it strikes me that you're not any too bright yourself. What good did you expect to do by coming here and reading me the riot act? Do you think I'm boob enough to say, okay, split the difference, and then you run back to him? Now that would be smart, wouldn't it? It would at least make... No." I stood up. "You want this settled, so do I. So does he, and I know it. All right. Let's go see him together. Then you can tell both of us to compromise. Then we'll find out who's being ridiculous. Come on." She looked startled. "You mean now?" "I mean now." She balked. She had objections. I overruled them. I had the advantage and used it. When I put on my coat, she just sat and chewed on her lip. Then she got up and came along. When we got downstairs and out to the sidewalk, there was no car there but mine. Apparently, she had come in a cab. I doubt if Philip Tingley ought to own a car, so I snubbed it, and we walked to the corner and flagged a taxi. She shoved clear into her corner, and I returned the compliment after hearing her give an address in the 70s just east of Fifth Avenue. During the ride, she showed no desire for conversation. She allowed Philip to pay the fare, which seemed to me a little scrubby under the circumstances. Before the massive ornamental door to the vestibule, she stood aside, and I depressed the lever and pushed it open. The inner door swung open without any summons, and she passed through with me on her heels. A man in uniform closed the door. She seemed to have shrunk, and she looked pale and peaked. She was scared stiff. She asked the man, "Is Mr. Judd upstairs?" "Yes, Miss Judd." She led me upstairs to a large room with 1,000 books and a fireplace and exactly the kind of chairs I like. In one of them was a guy I didn't like. He turned his head at our entrance. Her voice came from a constricted throat. Guthrie, I thought what stopped her was the blaze from his eyes. It was enough to stop anyone. I walked over and asked him, "Is Aiken around?" He ignored me. He spoke to his sister as if she had been a spot of grease. "Where did this man come from?" "It's a long story," I said, "but I'll make it short. She went to Philip Tingley's flat, and I was there, and she thought I was him." I waved a hand. "Mistaken identity." She thought. He was speechless. That alone was worth the price of admission. His sister was staring at me frozenly. He picked on her. "Get out," he said in cold fury. "You incomparable fool." She was licked. She went. I waited till the door had closed behind her, and then said, "We had a good, long talk. It's an interesting situation. Now, I give you an invitation I was going to extend yesterday when you interrupted me. You're going down to 35th Street to talk to Nero Wolfe." "I'll talk with you," he said between his teeth. "Sit down." "Oh, no, I invited you first, and I don't like you. If you do any wriggling or squirming, I swear I'll sell it to a tabloid and retire on the proceeds." I pointed to the door. "This way to the egress." Wolfe sat at his desk. I sat at mine, with my notebook open. Guthrie Judd was in the witness box near Wolfe's desk. Wolfe emptied his beer glass, wiped his lips, and leaned back. "You don't," he said, "seem to realize the thing is now completely beyond your control. All you can do is save us a little time, which we would be inclined to appreciate. I make no commitment. We can collect the details without you if we have to, or the police can. The police are clumsy and sometimes not too discreet, but when they're shown where to dig, they do a pretty good job. We know that Philip Tingley is your sister's son, and that's the main thing. That's what you were struggling to conceal. The rest is only to fill in. Who, for instance, is Philip's father?" Judd, his eyes narrowed and his jaw clamped, gazed at him in silence. "Who is Philip's father?" Wolfe repeated patiently. Judd held the pose. Wolfe shrugged. "Very well." He turned to me. "Call Inspector Kramer. With the men he has, a thing like this—" "Did you make a noise, sir?" "Yes," Judd snapped. "Damn you, Philip's father is dead. He was Thomas Tingley, Arthur's father." "I see. Then Arthur was Philip's brother." "Half-brother." Judd looked as if he would rather say it with bullets than words. "Thomas was married and had 2 children, a son and a daughter, by his wife. The son was Arthur." "Was the wife still alive when—" "Yes. My sister went to work in the Tingley factory in 1909. I was then 25 years old, just getting a start in life. She was 19. Arthur was a year or 2 younger than me. His father, Thomas, was approaching 50. In 1911, my sister told me she was pregnant and who was responsible for it. I was making a little more money then, and I sent her to a place in the country. In September of that year, the boy was born. My sister hated him without ever seeing him. She refused to look at him. He was placed in a charity home and was forgotten by her and me. At that time, I was occupied with my own affairs to the exclusion of considerations that should have received my attention. Many years later, it occurred to me that there might be records at this place that had better be destroyed. I had inquiries made." "When was that?" "Only 3 years ago. I learned then what had happened. Thomas Tingley had died in 1913, and his wife a year later. His son Arthur had married in 1912, and Arthur's wife had died in an accident, and in 1915 Arthur had legally adopted the 4-year-old boy from the charity home. How did you know it was that boy? I went to see Arthur. He knew the boy was his half-brother. His father, on his deathbed, had told him all about it and charged him with the child's welfare, secretly, since at that time Thomas's wife was still alive. 2 years later, after Arthur's wife had died, leaving him childless, he had decided on the adoption. You said you had a search made for the records. Did Arthur have them? Yes, but he wouldn't give them up. I tried to persuade him. I offered an extravagant sum. He was stubborn. He didn't like me, and he was disappointed in the boy who had turned out a blithering fool. Wolf grunted. So you made efforts to get the records by other methods. No, I didn't. A corner of Judd's mouth twisted up. You can't work me into a melodrama. I don't fit. Not even a murder. I knew Arthur's character and had no fear of any molestation during his lifetime, and he conceded me a point. He put the papers in a locked box in his safe and willed the box and its contents to me. Not that he told me where they were. I found that out later. When? 2 days ago. Wolf's brows went up. 2 days? Yes. Monday morning, Philip called at my office. I had never seen him since he was a month old, but he established his identity, and he had copies with him of those records. He demanded $1 million. Judd's voice rose. $1 million! What was the screw? A threat to publish? Oh, no, he was smoother than that. He said he came to me only because his adopted father would allow him nothing but a pittance. He said pittance, and had disinherited him in his will. Arthur had been fool enough to let him read the will, rubbing it in, I suppose, and the bequest of the locked box to me had made him smell a rat. He had stolen the box from the safe and got it open, and there it was. His threat was not to publish, but to sue me and my sister for damages for abandoning him as an infant, which of course amounted to the same thing, but that put a face on it, and was something we could not allow to happen under any circumstances, and he knew it. Wolf said, So why didn't you pay him? Because it was outrageous. You don't just hand out $1 million. I don't, but you could. I didn't, and I wanted a guarantee that would end it. For one thing, I had to be sure I was getting all the original records, and Arthur was the only one who could satisfy me on that, and he would see me Monday. I put Philip off for a day. The next morning, yesterday, Arthur phoned me that the box was gone from the safe, but even then he wouldn't come to my office or meet me somewhere, so I had to go to him. I looked up from the notebook with a grin. Yeah, and I met you coming out. When I put that chalk, he rudely went on without even glancing at me. I went to his office and told him of Philip's demand and threat. He was enraged. He thought Philip could be browbeaten into surrendering the box, and I didn't. What I proposed, but I couldn't do anything with him. He would have it his way. It was left that he would talk with Philip that afternoon, and the three of us would have it out the next morning, Wednesday. That would have been today, in his office. I had to accept. That won't do, Wolf said bluntly. Don't try any dodging now. I'm not. I am telling you. A lie, Mr. Judd. It's no good. You three were to meet at Tingley's office Tuesday evening, not Wednesday morning. And you went there.